Rain poured like judgment from the sky that night, drenching the cracked asphalt outside St. Mary's Hospital. A man in a black leather vest stumbled through the storm, clutching a small, motionless body in his arms. On his chest gleamed the red and white emblem of the Hells Angels, enough to make anyone hesitate. Inside the emergency room, silence fell as he entered, soaked and desperate. Nurses froze. Doctors averted their eyes. Nobody moved. Until one woman, a black nurse with steady hands and a heart that refused to judge, stepped forward. In that instant, everything changed. Her name was Nia Carter, a senior nurse with 10 years of night shifts behind her. She'd seen overdoses, accidents, heartbreaks, but nothing quite like this. The man who burst through the doors wasn't just any biker. The patches on his vest screamed trouble, the kind of trouble most people cross the street to avoid. Behind him, the storm roared as he shouted for help, voice cracking in panic. But it wasn't his words that froze the room. It was the fear. The reputation of men like him preceded them. And in that sterile room, surrounded by white coats, everyone hesitated. Nia didn't. She saw the pale face of the little girl in his arms, maybe 7 years old, and instinct overrode judgment. Without a word, she cleared a gurney, gestured for him to lay the child down, and began working. Around her, others watched, whispering. Some muttered about who he was, others about not getting involved. But Nia's focus was the child, the fragile heartbeat fading beneath soaked clothes and rainwater. As she worked, flashes of her own past came back, her father's words about doing right, even when it costs you comfort. "Don't let hate teach you who you are," he'd said. And so she pressed on, unaware that this one act would ripple far beyond the hospital walls, reaching into a world few dared to touch. Hours passed like slow thunder. The little girl, her name, she learned, was Lily, had nearly drowned in a nearby lake after her father, Rick, lost control of their bike trying to outrun the storm. The prognosis was grim. But under Nia's steady care, Lily's breathing steadied, her pulse faint but returning. Still, every move Nia made was watched with quiet disapproval. Some colleagues avoided helping altogether. Others whispered accusations. "Why risk your license for them? You don't know what those people stand for." But Nia did know, at least what people stood for. She had lived long enough to see kindness where the world least expected it and cruelty where it was most comfortable. She had treated men who spat at her, women who refused her care, and yet she'd never walked away. Tonight would be no different. Rick sat outside the ICU room, head in his hands. The tattoos across his arms told stories of violence and rebellion. But in that moment, all she saw was a father, terrified, broken. She offered him water. He refused, muttering that nobody would have helped him anyway. He wasn't entirely wrong. By dawn, Lily was stable. The worst had passed, though the tension had not. Word spread quickly through the hospital. The black nurse who treated a Hells Angels kid when everyone else turned away. Some praised her courage. Others questioned her choices. The gossip spilled beyond those walls into the streets, into the motorcycle clubs themselves. 3 days later, the rumble of engines filled the hospital parking lot. One by one, motorcycles lined up, chrome and thunder in the early morning sun. Patients and staff gathered at the windows as nearly 100 bikers stood outside, jackets emblazoned with the same feared emblem. No one knew what to expect, vengeance or gratitude. Nia, still finishing her shift, stepped outside with steady calm, heart pounding beneath her scrubs. Rick stood at the front of the crowd, his daughter in his arms, now awake, color returning to her cheeks. The sight alone could have softened stone. He walked toward Nia slowly, the roar of engines silencing behind him. Every step felt like a question. What happens when two worlds that never meet suddenly collide under the weight of one woman's courage? When he reached her, he stopped, eyes glassy under the harsh sunlight. Without a word, he knelt, setting Lily down so the girl could hug the nurse who saved her life. The crowd of bikers watched in reverent silence. Some removed their helmets. Others, men hardened by years of violence and loss, wiped at their faces. Rick finally spoke, his voice hoarse but loud enough for everyone to hear. You didn't see a patch. You saw my kid. It wasn't an apology. It was acknowledgement, raw, unguarded truth. He gestured to his brothers. In a moment of unity few could have imagined, nearly 100 men formed a line, placing their hands over their hearts, each offering quiet respect to the woman who crossed a line others refused to. The hospital security team watched nervously. But there was no threat here, only gratitude, rumbling like thunder, ready to rain kindness instead of fear. Nia stood motionless, humbled, uncertain how to respond. All she could do was smile and whisper a quiet, "You're welcome." The story spread, first among the hospital staff, then to nearby towns, and soon across the country. At first, it was whispers in the cafeteria, quiet mentions in morning briefings. "Did you hear what Nia did?" But by the end of the week, local reporters had caught wind of it, a story too powerful to stay confined to the halls of St. Mary's. Headlines appeared on television screens and social media feeds. A black nurse who helped a biker's child when no one else would. Yet, beneath those headlines was a more profound truth, one that couldn't be captured in print or pixels. It wasn't about race or rebellion or even redemption. It was about the raw, unfiltered power of one human being choosing empathy over fear. Nia hadn't made a statement or planned to challenge anyone's prejudice. She had done her job, guided by conscience, not comfort. But the simplicity of that act became a spark, one that lit fires of compassion in hearts long hardened by stereotypes. In the weeks that followed, St. Mary's Hospital began to change in quiet but undeniable ways. Men from biker clubs started visiting the children's ward, their rough exteriors softening as they handed out teddy bears and coloring books. Others volunteered blood, their tattoos and leather vests standing in stark contrast to the sterile white walls. Donations arrived from unexpected places, envelopes without return addresses, cards signed from the road. One day, a fleet of motorcycles escorted a delivery truck full of toys to the hospital's pediatric wing. No speeches were given, no photos taken, just the deep rumble of engines fading into the distance as a symbol of gratitude. When asked why they did it, one man, his beard streaked with gray, said, "That nurse showed us what real strength looks like." Another added, "She saw a kid, not a patch." That's something this world forgets too easily. For Nia, life continued with its quiet rhythm. The night shifts, the paperwork, the hum of hospital machines that never slept. She never sought recognition, and when news outlets reached out for interviews, she politely declined. "It's not my story," she said softly. "It's Lily's." But deep down, she knew the experience had changed her too. Every time she walked through those corridors, she carried the memory of that night, the rain, the silence, the choice to step forward when everyone else stepped back. And sometimes, when the late-night hours stretched long and the hospital seemed too still, she'd hear it, the distant familiar rumble of motorcycles outside. Not menacing this time, but reassuring, like an echo of solidarity. Those engines became a reminder that compassion travels further than hate ever could, bridging divides that laws, protests, and politics often fail to cross. In a world still divided by color, class, and creed, Nia's quiet defiance spoke louder than any speech. She didn't treat a biker's daughter. She treated a child. She didn't weigh the worthiness of a life. She honored it instinctively. And through that simple, selfless act, she built a bridge between two worlds that had never spoken the same language, until that night when kindness translated perfectly. Because sometimes, the most powerful revolutions don't roar. They whisper, they heal. They begin in the steady hands of someone who refuses to let hate define their heart. And if we're listening closely, we might hear them, in the rain, in the silence, in the quiet courage of those who choose love when the world offers every reason not to.